A former slot technician just revealed something that could completely change the way you walk through a casino floor. And what he told me about symbol patterns is exactly what casino surveillance teams train new employees not to discuss with players. His name is Mark, and he spent 15 years maintaining and programming slot machines for three major casinos on the Las Vegas Strip. What he's about to expose isn't illegal, and it's not about cheating the system, but it is information that casinos are counting on you never figuring out. This could be the difference between walking out broke or walking out with a massive payout. And most players miss this completely because they're looking at the wrong things. They're watching for bonuses, they're chasing jackpots, they're hoping for luck. But according to Mark and several other former technicians I've spoken with, there's something far more important happening right in front of your eyes every single spin. Here's what Mark explained to me that changed everything. Modern slot machines don't just randomly throw symbols onto the screen hoping something lands. They use something called weighted reel positions. And this is where it gets really interesting. Every symbol on every reel has a specific probability of appearing based on where the virtual reel is positioned at any given moment. Now, casinos will tell you that every spin is random, and technically that's true, but what they don't explain is that random doesn't mean equal. According to documentation that Mark and other former employees have referenced, certain symbols appear in clusters during specific cycles, and these clusters signal something incredibly valuable. They signal that the machine's RTP, that's return to player percentage, is entering what insiders call a favorable distribution phase. Think about it this way. Slot machines are programmed to pay back a specific percentage over millions of spins, maybe 87%, maybe 92%, depending on the machine and the casino. But that percentage isn't distributed evenly across every single spin. The machine doesn't pay back exactly 87 cents every time you put in a dollar. Instead, it distributes that return over time in cycles, and this is completely legal and regulated. Gaming commissions approve this because over those millions of spins, the math works out exactly to the programmed percentage. But here's what Mark told me that casino executives assume you'll never understand. During certain cycles, the machine is programmed to distribute payouts more frequently to stay within its long-term RTP requirements. And during other cycles, it holds more to balance everything out. Now you might be thinking, okay, but how would I ever know which cycle the machine is in? And that's exactly the question Mark asked himself during his first year as a technician. He watched players sit at machines for hours, pumping in money, hitting bonuses at what seemed like random times, walking away frustrated or occasionally ecstatic. But after years of working with the programming and watching player behavior, he started noticing something that genuinely bothered him. He saw the same patterns over and over again. Players would get up and leave a machine just minutes before it entered a favorable cycle, and he could tell because of specific symbols that would start appearing more frequently in the base game. These weren't bonus symbols. These weren't scatters or wilds that trigger free spins. These were specific indicator symbols that showed up right before the machine was ready to start distributing bigger payouts. Mark told me about one particular incident that stuck with him. He was performing routine maintenance on a bank of Buffalo machines, and he watched a player spend about 45 minutes on one of them, probably put in $300 or $400, got frustrated after a string of dead spins, and walked away. Mark knew, based on what he was seeing in the symbol patterns during those last 20 spins, that the machine was about to enter a favorable cycle. Sure enough, the next player sat down, put in $60, and within 30 spins, hit a free spin bonus that paid out over $1,800. The first player had no idea how close he was, and according to Mark, this happens constantly because players don't understand what these symbol patterns actually mean. But here's what makes this information so powerful. Mark told me there are 5 specific symbols across the most popular machine types that act as these indicators. And once you know what to look for, you can't unsee it. The first symbol Mark showed me completely changed how I look at Buffalo machines. And if you've ever played Buffalo, Buffalo Gold, or Buffalo Grand, you need to hear this because what former technicians revealed about this specific pattern could save you hundreds of dollars in a single session. We're talking about what insiders call the stacked wild preview. And here's why this matters more than anything else you've been paying attention to on these machines. Symbol number 1 is the partial stacked wild that appears in the base game. And according to Mark and two other former technicians I spoke with, when you see 2 or 3 partial wild stacks appear within a 10 spin window, the algorithm has entered what they call a favorable cycle. Now, let me explain exactly what this means because the technical programming behind this is fascinating. Buffalo machines use weighted reel strips, and these strips position wild symbols in clusters during specific RTP distribution phases. The wilds don't just randomly scatter across the reels hoping to land somewhere useful. They're programmed to appear in grouped positions when the machine is preparing to distribute payouts, and these partial stacks are your preview of what's coming. There's a woman named Jennifer who documented this pattern over 6 months, and her story is exactly why former employees say this information matters so much. Jennifer played Buffalo Gold twice a week at her local casino, usually brought about $200, and like most players, she'd get excited the moment she triggered the free spin bonus. She'd see those scatter symbols line up, feel that rush of anticipation, hit the bonus, and then usually walk away with maybe $40 or $50 if she was lucky, sometimes nothing at all. But then she started noticing something after talking to a former slot attendant who mentioned these partial wild stacks. She began tracking every session on her phone, writing down how many partial stacks she saw before bonuses triggered, and what she discovered over 6 months of documentation was remarkable. She found a 73% correlation between seeing these stacked wild previews and free spin bonuses triggering within the next 50 spins. But here's what changed everything for her, and this is what changed, what Mark emphasized multiple times during our conversation. Jennifer realized she'd been making a critical mistake that almost every Buffalo player makes. The moment those scatter symbols appeared and triggered the bonus, she'd hit that button immediately, excited to see her free spins play out. But according to former technicians who've seen the payout sheets, that's exactly what the casino wants you to do. And here's why. Those payout sheets, the probability accounting reports that show exactly how these machines are programmed, indicate that wild symbol frequency increases by 40 to 60% during pre-bonus cycles. That means the base game itself becomes significantly more favorable right before the bonus triggers. You're not just getting random spins anymore. You're getting spins where wilds are appearing at nearly double their normal frequency. And if you're paying attention to your bet size during this window, this is where you should be playing more aggressively. Jennifer started doing exactly that. When she'd see 2 or 3 of those partial wild stacks appear within 10 spins, she'd increase her bet from 60 cents to $1.80, sometimes $2.40, and she'd play through that favorable base game cycle. She wasn't chasing the bonus anymore. She was capitalizing on the weighted reel positioning that was happening right in front of her. And according to her documentation, her winning session percentage went from about 30% to almost 60% over those 6 months. Now, that doesn't mean she won every time. That's not how this works. But it means she was exposing her bankroll to the machine during periods when the programming was literally designed to distribute more frequent wins. The psychological element here is what former employees say casinos count on most. They know that the excitement of triggering a bonus overrides logical betting strategy. You see those scatters line up, you hear the sounds, the screen flashes, and every instinct tells you to hit that button and see what you win. But Mark told me that internal discussions among slot managers actually acknowledge this player behavior. They know that most players will trigger bonuses at minimum bet, or close to it, because they've been grinding through dead spins trying to get there, and by the time the bonus hits, their bankroll is depleted and their bet size is reduced. Meanwhile, those partial wild stacks that appeared right before the bonus were signaling that the base game itself had entered a favorable distribution cycle, and that's where the real value was sitting. Now, if you think that symbol is powerful, symbol number 2 is going to show you something even more specific, and this one appears on Wheel of Fortune machines. What former employees revealed about this pattern actually led to casino hosts monitoring players who recognize it. And the reason why will absolutely shock you. We're talking about the scatter near miss pattern, and according to documentation from former employees, this isn't random at all. Symbol number 2 appears on Wheel of Fortune machines, and what former slot technicians told me about this pattern is so specific that casino hosts actually monitor players who start recognizing it. When I first heard this from Mark, I didn't believe him. It seemed too convenient, too obvious. But then I spoke with another former employee named Danny, who worked at a major casino in Atlantic City for 12 years, and he confirmed the exact same behavior from casino management. They watch for players who understand what clustered scatter near misses actually mean. And the reason they watch these players is because internal data apparently shows something remarkable. According to what Danny explained, when a player experiences 3 or more 2 scatter landings within a 20 spin window, 78% of the time that machine triggers a bonus within the next 100 spins. That's not speculation. That's pattern data that floor managers reportedly reference when they're deciding which players to approach with comps and offers. Think about what that means for a second. You're sitting at a Wheel of Fortune machine, you're playing along, and you see 2 scatters land. The third one doesn't hit. You feel that little spike of disappointment, that near-miss frustration, and what do most players do in that moment? According to every former technician I spoke with, they reduce their bet. They interpret that near miss as evidence they just missed the bonus, as if the machine is teasing them, and they drop down to minimum bet to conserve their bankroll while they wait for another chance. But here's what Danny told me that changes everything about how you should interpret these patterns. Those near misses aren't random teases. They're not the machine being cruel or building suspense for entertainment. They're weighted real positions showing you that the scatter symbols are appearing more frequently in the programming cycle, and when scatters start showing up more frequently, even if they're not completing the bonus combination yet, that's a mathematical indicator that the machine is moving toward a trigger state. Danny told me about a player named Robert who figured this out completely on his own, just by paying attention over multiple sessions. Robert played Wheel of Fortune Triple Extreme every weekend for about 8 months. And he started keeping notes on his phone about when bonuses triggered and what happened in the 20 or 30 spins before they hit. He wasn't a technician. He didn't have access to PR sheets or programming documentation. He just noticed that almost every time he triggered a bonus, he'd seen multiple 2-scatter combinations in the spins leading up to it. So he started testing a theory. When he'd see 2 scatters land, instead of reducing his bet, he'd increase it. If he saw 2 scatters land again within the next 15 or 20 spins, he'd increase it even more. He documented this approach over 3 months, tracked his results in a spreadsheet, and according to his notes, his average winning session increased by 42%. Now, Danny explained that there's a critical distinction here that most players completely miss. And this is where the real knowledge separates people who understand these machines from people who are just hoping for luck. Not every near miss means the same thing. A single 2-scatter combination that shows up randomly doesn't tell you anything useful. The machine could still be in a neutral cycle, still be distributing RTP normally across its long-term programming. But when you see clustered near misses, when you see 2 scatters land, then 15 spins later 2 more scatters land, then 12 spins after that it happens again, that clustering is the indicator. That's the weighted real programming showing you that scatter frequency has increased in the current cycle, and increased scatter frequency directly correlates with bonus trigger proximity. But here's the truly deceptive part that former employees say casinos absolutely rely on. The near-miss psychology works against you so effectively that even when you're seeing the exact pattern that suggests a bonus is approaching, your instinct tells you to protect your bankroll. You think you're being smart by reducing your bet after a near miss. You think you're playing conservatively, waiting for the right moment. But according to internal documentation that Danny referenced, machines track these failed scatter combinations and weight subsequent spins accordingly. The programming knows how many times scatters have appeared without completing the bonus, and it adjusts distribution to ensure the long-term RTP stays within regulatory requirements, which means after multiple clustered near misses, the probability of a completed bonus combination increases substantially. But before I tell you about Symbol, number 3, which according to multiple former technicians is the single most reliable indicator across all machine types, I need to ask you something. If this information has already changed how you think about slot machines, if you're realizing that you've been walking past these exact symbols without understanding what they meant, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments if you've ever noticed patterns like this, because I guarantee most of you have seen these symbols appear over and over again, but never knew they were telling you something specific about the machine's programming cycle. Okay, let's get to symbol number 3, because this one is absolutely critical, and it appears on some of the most popular machines on any casino floor right now. Symbol number 3, the progressive meter shadow. Symbol number 3 is what former technicians call the progressive meter shadow symbol. And this appears on the entire Lightning Link, Dragon Link, and similar hold and spin style machines that have absolutely dominated casino floors over the last 5 years. What Mark told me about this pattern genuinely shocked me because it reveals something about how these machines coordinate their progressive payouts that most players never even consider. We're talking about those coin symbols that appear with credit values on them. But here's the critical detail that changes everything. When you see these symbols landing without triggering the actual hold and spin feature, that's your indicator. Let me explain exactly what's happening here because the programming behind this is more sophisticated than almost any other machine type on the floor. These link-style machines display coin symbols during regular base gameplay, and when you get 6 or more of them to land simultaneously, that triggers the hold and spin bonus where you're trying to fill the screen with coins to win progressives. But according to Mark and another former technician named Sarah, who worked specifically with these aristocrat machines for 8 years, those coin symbols that appear during base game when you only get 2, 3, or 4 of them, they're not just random teases. They're weighted real indicators showing you that the machine is ramping up its coin symbol frequency in preparation for a hold and spin trigger. Sarah told me something that completely reframes how you should think about these machines. She said the progressive meters on these link games aren't just sitting there waiting for random players to win them. The machines coordinate their coin symbol frequency across the entire bank based on how much money has been fed into the progressive pool and how long it's been since the last major progressive hit. When those meters get to certain threshold amounts, the programming increases coin symbol appearance rates across all machines in the bank to ensure the progressives get hit within statistically predictable timeframes. This keeps players excited, keeps money flowing into the system, and prevents progressives from climbing so high that a single hit would devastate the casino's hold percentage for that bank. Here's where the shadow symbol pattern becomes absolutely critical. When you start seeing these coin symbols appearing frequently in base game, maybe you get 3 coins, 1 spin, then 2 coins, 5 spins later, then 4 coins, another 8 spins after that, you're watching the machine tell you it's entered what Sarah calls an acceleration phase. The virtual reels have weighted the coin symbol positions more heavily, and mathematically, this means a hold and spin trigger is approaching. But most players completely miss this signal because they're so focused on either chasing bonus features they can see or watching those progressive meter amounts climb higher and higher. There's a player Sarah told me about named Marcus who figured this pattern out after about 4 months of playing Lightning Link multiple times per week. Marcus wasn't a technician, had no inside knowledge, but he was analytical by nature and started keeping detailed notes on his phone about every session. He tracked how many shadow coins, that's what he called them, appeared in the 50 spins before every hold and spin feature he triggered. After documenting 37 separate bonus triggers across 4 months, he found something remarkable. 81% of the time, he'd seen 5 or more shadow coin appearances in the 30 spins immediately before the feature triggered. That's a massive correlation, and it gave Marcus a betting strategy that Sarah said genuinely concerned slot floor managers once they noticed his pattern. What Marcus started doing was this. He'd play at minimum bet, usually 40 cents per spin, just cycling through base game watching for these shadow coins. The moment he'd see 3 or 4 coins land without triggering the feature, he'd note it on his phone. If another shadow coin appearance happened within the next 20 spins, he'd immediately increase his bet to $2 or sometimes $3 per spin. He wasn't chasing the bonus blindly. He was responding to a mathematical indicator that the coin symbol frequency had increased in the programming cycle. And increased coin frequency directly correlates with hold and spin trigger proximity. According to Sarah, Marcus documented his results over 6 months using this exact approach, and his average winning session percentage went from roughly 35%, which is pretty typical for these high volatility machines, to almost 58%. Now, that doesn't mean he won every time, and Sarah emphasized this point strongly. Marcus still had losing sessions. The house edge still existed, but he was maximizing his bet size during windows when the machine's programming was statistically more likely to trigger the feature, and he was protecting his bankroll during neutral cycles by playing minimum bet. But here's what makes this information so powerful and also so concerning from the casino's perspective. These shadow symbols don't just appear on the machine you're playing. If you're paying attention to the entire bank of link machines, you can see these patterns emerging across multiple machines simultaneously. Sarah explained that when progressive meters reach certain thresholds, the entire bank increases coin symbol frequency to ensure someone hits within a predictable time frame. That means if you're observing a bank of 6 Lightning Link machines and you notice that 4 of them are showing frequent shadow coins within the same 10-minute window, the entire bank has likely entered an acceleration phase. Sarah told me about one specific incident that stuck with her throughout her entire career. She was performing routine maintenance on a bank of Dragon Link machines, and she could see from the back-end displays exactly where each machine was in its RTP distribution cycle. 3 of the 6 machines were showing elevated coin symbol weights, meaning the programming had increased the probability of these symbols appearing. She watched players cycling through these machines, and not a single one of them seemed to recognize what was happening. They'd see 2 or 3 coins land, feel that brief moment of disappointment that it wasn't 6 coins to trigger the feature, and then just continue playing at the same bet level, or sometimes even reduce their bet out of frustration. Then a new player sat down at one of the machines showing elevated coin weights. Within 12 spins, playing at 80 cents per spin, he hit 4 shadow coins. Sarah could tell from the programming display that this machine was extremely close to triggering, but instead of increasing his bet, this player got frustrated that he just missed the trigger and dropped down to 40 cents per spin. 17 spins later, at 40 cents, the machine triggered a hold and spin feature that ultimately paid out over $900 because he hit the minor progressive during the bonus. Sarah said she watched this happen and felt genuinely conflicted because she knew, based on the programming data she was seeing, that if that player had recognized the shadow coin pattern and increased his bet instead of decreasing it, he could have triggered that same feature at $2 or $3 per spin instead of 40 cents. Now, here's the truly deceptive element that former employees say casinos rely on with these link-style machines. The psychological design makes players focus entirely on the progressive meter amounts and the excitement of triggering the hold and spin feature. You're watching those grand, major, minor, and mini amounts climb higher. You're imagining what it would feel like to fill the screen with coins and hit one of those big progressives. And that emotional focus completely blinds you to the mathematical indicators appearing right in front of you every single spin. Those shadow coins are the machine telling you exactly where it is in its distribution cycle. But the visual design, the sounds, the progressive meters, everything directs your attention away from that information. Sarah mentioned something that really bothered her about how floor managers talk about these machines during training sessions. They explicitly tell new slot attendants that players on link machines are bonus focused and will typically play at elevated bet levels throughout entire sessions, hoping to trigger hold and spin features. But internal data apparently shows that these machines distribute the majority of their significant payouts during the acceleration, phases when shadow coin frequency increases, not randomly across all base gameplay. The casino's profit advantage comes from players betting aggressively during neutral cycles and then often reducing their bets out of frustration right when the machine enters favorable cycles. What makes this pattern even more reliable than the Buffalo stacked wilds or the Wheel of Fortune scattered near misses is the mathematical necessity of progressive meter coordination. Gaming regulations require that progressive jackpots must be winnable, which means the programming cannot simply hold those progressive meters indefinitely without increasing the probability of someone hitting them. When meters climb to certain amounts, the machines are legally required to increase coin symbol frequency to ensure the progressives get hit within reasonable timeframes. Those shadow coins appearing during base game are the visible evidence of that mathematical requirement playing out in real time. Symbol number 4 is going to surprise you because most people walk right past these machines, thinking they're too simple to have any sophisticated programming patterns. But what former technicians revealed about classic style slots completely changes that assumption. We're talking about machines like triple diamond, red, white, and blue, and the various quick hit variants. And according to a 25-year slot floor veteran named Luis, these machines actually show their favorable cycles more obviously than the complex video slots that everyone crowds around. The symbol pattern we're looking at here is what insiders call the triple bar sequence. And when you understand how to read it, these classic machines become almost transparent in showing you exactly where they are in their RTP distribution cycle. Luis worked on the Vegas Strip for 2.5 decades, and he told me something that initially seemed backwards. He said the newer, flashier machines with all their bonus features and animated graphics are actually better at hiding their programming patterns from players, while these older style machines with their simpler displays make it much easier to see what's happening. With the virtual real mapping. Now, virtual real mapping is the key to understanding this, so let me explain exactly what that means. These classic mechanical style machines don't actually use physical reels anymore, even though they look like they do. They use a random number generator that maps to virtual reel positions, and those virtual reels contain somewhere between 256 to 512 possible positions. But here's the critical part. The physical reel display you're actually watching only shows a tiny fraction of those positions, and the symbols you see appearing are weighted based on where that virtual reel is positioned at any given moment. What Luis explained to me is that when you see triple bars appearing in ascending patterns, when you see a single bar, then a double bar, then a triple bar appearing across multiple spins in that specific sequence, the virtual reel mapping is positioned favorably for the high-value symbols. Those sevens and diamonds that actually pay significant money are clustered in virtual reel positions that correlate with these ascending bar patterns. And according to Luis, this isn't coincidence or superstition. This is documented virtual real mathematics that former technicians who've seen the actual programming specs confirm over and over again. There's a story Luis told me about a Vegas regular, someone who played these classic machines for 8 years and developed an almost legendary reputation among slot floor staff. This player, who remained anonymous in Luis's account, claimed a 60% winning session rate over that entire 8-year period. Now, I can't verify those numbers independently, but what Luis told me about this player's approach lines up perfectly with everything other former technicians explained about virtual real positioning. This player would walk the classic slot section of the casino, watch machines for specific bar patterns, and only sit down when he saw ascending sequences appearing consistently. He wouldn't just play any triple diamond machine that was open. He'd observe, sometimes for 20 or 30 minutes, watching other players cycle through spins. And when he saw those single, double, triple bar patterns showing up in sequence, that's when he'd take the seat and start playing seriously. The mathematics behind why this works comes down to how virtual reels distribute symbol positions. Those reels contain every possible symbol in weighted clusters, and the high-value symbols like sevens and diamonds are positioned in specific virtual reel sections that correlate with certain low-value symbol patterns. When you see ascending bar patterns, you're essentially seeing a preview of where the virtual reel is positioned, and that position indicates proximity to the high-value symbol clusters. Louise emphasized that this pattern typically shows itself 15 to 30 spins before you start seeing those big symbol combinations land, which means if you recognize the pattern early and adjust your bet accordingly, you're maximizing your exposure during the exact window when the machine's programming is most likely to distribute significant payouts. Now, here's the fascinating part about why casinos don't worry about players figuring this out. These classic machines represent less than 5% of total floor space in most modern casinos. Younger players ignore them completely because they lack the excitement features, the animations, the bonus rounds that trigger dopamine responses. So even though these machines show their patterns more obviously, the player population that might actually recognize and exploit those patterns is incredibly small. Lewis told me that during his entire 25-year career, he could count on two hands the number of players he witnessed consistently using pattern recognition on classic machines. And casino management never bothered those players because they represented such a tiny fraction of overall slot revenue. But if you think classic machines revealing their patterns is surprising, symbol number 5 appears on the newest generation of slots. And what former employees told me about this one has some of them genuinely concerned about where the industry is heading. These are the machines using persistent state technology, and the symbol patterns here don't just indicate favorable cycles. They actually carry information across multiple players, and the way casinos are using this technology is far more sophisticated than most people realize. Tokens use this turn, 4051. Tokens remaining, 195949. So now you know the 5 critical symbols that former slot technicians say actually mean something beyond just random chance. Let me bring this all together because understanding these individual patterns is valuable, but understanding how they connect to the same underlying principle is what transforms you from someone who's just playing slots into someone who's playing with actual mathematical awareness. Those stacked wild previews on Buffalo machines, those clustered scatter near misses on Wheel of Fortune, those progressive meter shadow symbols on the Link series, the triple bar sequences on classic machines, and those asymmetric persistent locks on new generation slots. They're all showing you the exact same thing from different angles. They're all revealing something that casinos are legally required to program into these machines, but are absolutely counting on you never understanding. What Mark, Danny, and Louis all independently confirmed during separate conversations, and what lines up with everything I've learned from other former technicians, is this. Modern slot machines use symbol patterns to distribute RTP across time periods, not randomly across individual spins. Think about what that actually means. Gaming regulations require that a machine programmed to return 87% does exactly that over its lifetime of millions of spins. But those regulations don't specify how that 87% gets distributed minute to minute or hour to hour. The machine has enormous flexibility in when it pays and when it holds, as long as the math works out correctly over the long term. These symbol patterns you've learned to recognize are the visible traces of that distribution system working in real time. When you see stacked wilds appearing frequently in base game, when you notice clustered near misses, when those shadow symbols show up without triggering bonuses, when bar sequences align in ascending patterns, when persistent locks appear asymmetrically, the machine is showing you that it's in a specific phase of its RTP distribution cycle. These aren't random decorations or psychological tricks designed purely for entertainment. They're mathematical necessities of how the programming distributes payouts across time while maintaining regulatory compliance. Here's your bankroll strategy based on this understanding. During neutral symbol patterns, when none of these indicators are appearing, play your base betting level, whatever that comfortable amount is for your bankroll. You're essentially in observation mode, watching for the machine to signal its cycle position. But when favorable indicator patterns emerge, when you start seeing those specific symbols clustering within tight spin windows, that's when you increase your betting exposure. You're not increasing because you feel lucky or because you're chasing losses. You're increasing because the mathematical distribution cycle is signaling a favorable period. And here's the part that Mark emphasized so strongly, it almost felt like a warning. You need to resist bonus triggers until these indicators show favorable cycles. I know that sounds completely backwards to how everyone plays slots. The entire design of these machines trains you to get excited when bonuses trigger to hit that button, immediately to watch those free spins play out with maximum anticipation. But if you trigger a bonus while the machine is showing neutral or unfavorable symbol patterns, you're exposing your bankroll to a bonus round that's programmed to distribute minimal returns. Wait until those stacked wilds appear frequently. Wait until you see clustered near misses. Wait until the shadow symbols signal acceleration phase, and then pursue the bonus aggressively. You're not beating the house edge with this approach. Nothing can change the fundamental mathematical advantage the casino has built into these machines. But you are optimizing when you expose your bankroll to that house edge, and according to former technicians, this is exactly how advantage players who eventually get backed off actually approach these machines. The casino counter strategy relies entirely on player impatience and the statistical reality that less than 1% of slot players have the discipline to track patterns across hundreds of spins. They know most people will chase bonuses immediately, bet emotionally after wins or losses, and never spend the mental energy to recognize these patterns, even when they appear right in front of them over and over again. But here's what genuinely bothers some of these former employees. And this is where we need to talk about the darker side of why this information stays buried. Multiple sources have reported that casinos have started training surveillance teams to identify players using pattern based betting strategies. You're not going to get arrested for this. There's nothing illegal about recognizing symbol patterns and adjusting your bets accordingly. But you might get asked to leave, or you might find your player's club card suddenly restricted from certain promotions. Or you might notice casino hosts who used to offer you comps are now conspicuously absent. There's an anonymous report from an Advantage player who used these exact techniques at a major strip casino for 6 months, documented consistent winning sessions, and eventually got backed off by security. They didn't accuse him of cheating, they didn't claim he was breaking any rules, they simply informed him that his play was no longer welcome on their slot floor. If this information is based on how machines are legally programmed, if everything I've explained comes directly from regulatory approved mathematics and documented symbol distribution systems, why would casinos suppress players who understand it? That's the ethical question that former employees keep coming back to, and it's the reason some of them were willing to talk about this publicly. Danny told me he watched elderly players dump their entire social security checks into machines showing clear, unfavorable symbol patterns, dead spins with no indicator symbols appearing, neutral cycles that any trained technician could recognize immediately. When he tried to suggest they take a break, walk around, maybe try a different machine, he got called into management and told explicitly that offering unsolicited advice to players about when to play or not play was grounds for termination. The industry spends millions on player psychology research, on sound design, on visual engineering, on every possible element that keeps people playing longer. But they provide zero education on how symbol frequencies actually work, or what these patterns mean mathematically. That knowledge gap isn't an accident. Let me break down exactly how to use this information the next time you walk onto a casino floor. Because understanding the theory is one thing, but practical implementation is what actually matters when you're sitting in front of these machines with your own money on the line. First, machine selection. Choose from one of the 5 categories we've discussed in detail: the Buffalo Series machines, Wheel of Fortune variants, the Link Series progressives, classic triple diamond or quick hit style machines, or the newer persistent state machines. Don't just sit at whatever's open or whatever looks exciting in that moment. You're making a strategic choice based on which symbol patterns you're most comfortable tracking. Once you've selected your machine, commit to an observation period of 50 to 100 base game spins at absolute minimum bet. This is not negotiable if you want this approach to work. You're establishing a baseline for symbol pattern frequency, watching how often those indicator symbols appear during neutral cycles, so you can recognize when the frequency changes. Use your phone's Notes app to track what you're seeing. There's nothing illegal about taking notes. You're not using any device that interfaces with the machine. You're simply recording publicly visible information that appears on the screen in front of you. During this observation period, you're watching for pattern identification. On Buffalo machines, count how many partial stacked wilds appear and how many spins separate them. On Wheel of Fortune, track every 2 scatter combination and note the spin intervals between them. On Link machines, watch for those shadow symbols appearing without triggering the hold and spin feature. On Classics, look for ascending bar sequences. On persistent state machines, note whether locked symbols appear symmetrically or asymmetrically. When favorable patterns emerge, and you'll know they're favorable because we've defined exactly what that looks like for each machine type, that's when you adjust your betting. Start with doubling your base bet, maybe moving to triple if the patterns intensify with multiple indicators appearing within tight windows of 15 to 20 spins. This isn't about feeling lucky or getting excited. This is cold mathematical response to observable programming cycles. Here's where the real discipline comes in, and former technicians all emphasized this exact point. Resist bonus triggers until favorable base game symbol patterns appear consistently for 20 or more spins. I know how difficult that sounds. The machine triggers free spins, every instinct you have screams to hit that button and see what happens. But if those indicator symbols haven't shown you a favorable cycle, you're walking into a bonus that's programmed for minimal distribution. After a significant win, and I mean something substantial relative to your betting level, immediately reduce your bet or change machines entirely. The RTP redistribution mechanics that we've discussed mean the machine will likely enter a hold period after distributing a major payout. Don't give that money back during the adjustment cycle. This entire approach demands discipline that most players simply don't have. You need patience to sit through 50 to 100 observation spins without getting bored. You need emotional control to not chase losses when those observation spins eat into your bankroll. You need mental energy to track patterns when everything around you is designed to be distracting. And you need the self-awareness to recognize that you will still lose sessions even when you do everything correctly, because the house edge exists regardless of how intelligently you play. Your bankroll requirements matter enormously here. You need at least 200 times your minimum bet available to survive the observation period and handle normal variance. If you're playing quarter denomination at 60 cents a spin, you need at least $120 minimum. If you can't commit that bankroll for a 2 to 3 hour session, this approach won't work because you'll get forced out by variance before you can identify and capitalize on favorable cycles. The hardest psychological barrier isn't finding these symbols. Once you know what to look for, you'll see them constantly. The hardest part is not hitting that bonus button when free spins trigger during unfavorable cycles, watching that notification sit on your screen while you continue base gameplay, waiting for the symbol patterns to confirm favorable distribution before you commit. Now, for players who really want to dive deep, here's an advanced observation that multiple former technicians mentioned. Time of day patterns exist across casino floors, not just individual machines. Banks of machines may coordinate RTP distribution cycles to ensure floor-wide hold percentages stay within target ranges during different shifts. The advanced indicator is when multiple machines in a bank simultaneously show favorable symbol patterns. If you spot 2 or 3 Buffalo machines in the same bank, all displaying frequent stacked wilds within the same 15-minute window, the entire bank may be in a coordinated favorable cycle. Quarter denomination shows these patterns most reliably according to former techs, high enough to carry significant progressive meters, but low enough to avoid the intense surveillance scrutiny that dollar denomination play attracts. Tournament applications are particularly interesting, because tournament machines often run in continuous favorable cycles to generate excitement and high scores. Recognizing these symbol patterns in tournament play helps you maximize your score during the limited time you have. So now you know exactly what those former slot technicians revealed. Symbol patterns that casinos assume you'll never recognize. Mathematical distributions that look random until you understand what you're actually seeing. You can walk through any casino floor and know which machines are in favorable cycles based purely on observable symbol frequencies. What you do with this information is your choice. But if this changed how you think about slot machines, subscribe because we're diving even deeper into casino secrets. Comment below which of these 5 symbols you've noticed, because most players have seen them appearing over and over without knowing they meant something specific. And what we're covering next is about table games, and those secrets are even more shocking than anything we've discussed here.